Great, thanks. And I just wanted to clarify. So if anyone out there, we know of teachers who are really interested in introducing futures literacy into their classroom or into their curriculum at a slightly higher level, should they contact you?
Oh, absolutely, directly. That's my email, peter@teachthefuture.org. Yeah, we have volunteers who work, but I generally deal with teachers in schools. We have other people who are working with hubs, other people working with young people like NGFP and the World Futures Day. But I'm the one who's I've got the educational background to talk to teachers in schools. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us. And you want to have your informal time?
Well, Peter, I was just wondering if you're free to stick around for 10 or 15 minutes as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I certainly do. Yeah, just because it's informal doesn't mean that I'm going to go away.
Oh, good.
Well, there's Julie and Housen. Good to see you folks. You're being so quiet. My gosh, someone you like you, right?
Here they are.
Yeah, good to see you. I see so many people that I know. I'm glad to see you guys. I am lucky to be one of the many followers of Peter Bishop and the U of H crew, and so have been teaching a futures thinking class to middle schoolers, and it's based off of the playbook that they put together, and have loved being able to work through it. And I'm lucky to have gone through the U of H program and graduated this past spring, and it has been so much fun. I put a video together and shared it with some of the U of H students of the kids. They did kind of a full project, like middle school version of a school project, and so fun, getting to learn from somebody like a Wendy Schultz and an Andy Hines of like how to distill this down like so far and be able to teach it and explain it in ways that are super quick. It was so much good learning for me to be able to say, like, how can I lessen the cognitive load of what these kids are enduring? So they did projects on like basketball, the future of basketball, the future of pickleball. Some of them did like one of the guys, I mean, he's going to rule the world one day, but he did the future of genetic mutation and genetic engineering. And it's fun because we also do like debates about technology and have questions like, okay, let's talk about GPT, and let's talk about, how do we use these technologies for the betterment of humankind, and good conversations with fifth graders about, why would a white woman use her voice and her life to alter the future for other people? And how do you as children get to change the trajectory when we meet an alien species one day, because it's going to happen? And who do you want not colonizing? And getting to have conversations like that with 5th through 8th graders is really fun. And I'm just so grateful for the stuff that you guys have done, Peter, because I think it sets such a great standard for people like myself who I'm an administrator, but I get to live as an educator part of the time. Housing came up one day and got to meet some of the students, and during our spring gathering that we have at U of H, and was glad to have him, and just Mushfika, another gal that moved here from being over in Japan. And so they got to come, and just getting to meet futurists in the Houston area has been so fun for those students to hear like, oh, there's jobs in this. Oh, like this can be a career. Oh, like this can affect the sport that I'm playing. It's just been very fun. So just wanted to say a quick thank you and share some stories about that.
That's terrific, Julie. You know that I'm always on the lookout for resources. I didn't know you. I knew we had a couple of meetings. I didn't know you'd actually turned it into a class. I'd love to see more about the class. So let's set up a time to chat, or just send me materials. I love the story. Great. Yeah, Housen, also another UH student, and working more in the corporate world, less in the education.
Yeah, I mean, you the man, Peter. I just want you to know, like,
well, I wouldn't go so far on that.
Yeah, no, for real. Like I just really appreciate your support. I mean, like for the CLA workshop that I talked about in the Discord, Peter was like a huge help in just like providing some perspective and making it a lot simpler than it really needed to be. And also just like, even with my own personal visions of like the planetary party in 2050, like he's also taken the time to kind of, I don't know, just like take a look at it and ask me some very good questions, which I appreciate. And I just want you to know it's made a difference. Like I've used it to frame my NGFP application, and so like just know like that seed that you've like watered is still alive. So just
Cool.
happy to be
Okay.
here. Yeah.
All right. Terrific. And I have to tell you that one of the things that I worked on beginning in the 80s was to try and create a community of graduates and students at UH right from the beginning. Because one of the saddest things of being an educator, I can tell you, is that you have not deep, but you have excellent relationships with students. In fact, that's what learning together is. It's a relationship, much more than it's textbooks and tests and all of that kind of stuff. So you build a learning relationship, and then they go off and be successful. And you lose touch. So I was kind of selfish about saying, let's stay in touch. Let's see where you go. And because we're also building a whole new profession, a whole new discipline together. So it's great to hear from the two of you. Who else would love to kind of jump in and chat about things in general?
Well, Peter, I know you said that what the future of Teach the Future might be is a little bit out of scope for your talk, but have you done any thinking about it?
Well, as I said, the current agenda, the most important thing in my work life right now is to create these lessons. I'm working with a brilliant teacher that I knew many years ago. She has helped me set up the framework for it. We've assembled a team of almost 7 or 8 people, teachers, filmmakers, videographers, coaches and directors and things like that, to try and put out a product that is high quality and within the reach of teachers, ultimately trying to get teachers as the gateway to schools, and then to school districts, so that the teacher may pick up a lesson and say, this is pretty good. I like this. I can teach this. I can use this. If that happens, then they might share it with their colleagues, and then the colleagues might share it with the principal. So it's a try and way of going up the ladder and actually selling all of these lessons as a curriculum. As I said, in my experience with schools, they will buy curriculums. They don't buy ideas. They don't develop ideas. They buy and because they're completely oversubscribed. I mean, they don't have any time. I get it. And so make it as easy as possible. So that's our primary purpose. Continuing these programs like NGFP and World Futures Day. We're talking to, believe it or not, an organization in Thailand for the ASEAN, that's serving in the ASEAN regions, that we may do a training for the young people in their organization. We have a partnership with UNICEF, and they just finished a wonderful program called Foresight Fellows. And one of the young people in our network, a high school student, was in that cohort. So it's I should be doing recording and developing these lessons full time, but the rest of the world, like JFS Community of Practice, pop up, and I never have learned to say no. So other things do tend to kind of get in the way. So that's where we're headed, though. I call it shrink wrap. You can go out and buy yourself a computer program. You don't have to program it yourself. So you can go out and buy yourself these lessons that I think are high quality, decent lessons about the future in a digestible, bite-sized portion, so the teachers can start picking them up. If 2 years from now they become a brand and people are excited about it, then we will have achieved success. And then we all get to the other 1.8 billion students in the world, which I'm never going to see, of course. That's why visions are so interesting, is that you work towards them, but you're not going to get to them. They're way too far out.
Peter, I'm actually interested in how the first day of, since you just had a recent training, how did it go? What were your takeaways from the day one?
Wow, Sabrina, thank you. Well, as I said, one of the good things was that the people involved, this is going to be a senior capstone course, a regular high school course that responds to some of the New York State requirements, of course. But one semester is focused on governance and the other semester is focused on economics. 3 teachers will be co-teaching it. And I knew their backgrounds. They're social science mostly. And the good thing about the session was that there was also a healthy number of administrators in there, which is unusual. Usually administrators will send teachers to training for good reason, but not participate themselves. My wife, as a campus principal and a central administrator, always went to all the trainings that she had her teachers go for. Even if she'd seen it before, she needed to be there to hear it, to be part of it, to be part of the group, and that they appreciated that. She told me a story again this morning about a guy in Houston. It's called, that we have regional service centers, and the Houston Center is called Region 4. Julie may know a little bit about them. It's a training place from the state sets up. One guy there was a brilliant trainer, and he required in his contract that the administration be in the training. And during one training session, he was going along, and the superintendent of the district who was there got up to leave. And before he got out the door, he said, we'll wait until you get back. And then he sat down. Now, this guy had, a lot of courage to be able to do that, but he was well known, he was a superstar, so he could do that. So that was one thing I was very happy about. The district has committed to it, not just kind of thrown teachers under the bus and said, tell us how that goes. One of the biggest concerns was to be overwhelmed. It's a brand new subject. And the principal, in fact, of the school was voicing that more than anything else. He's kind of protecting the teachers from getting a whole lot of extra stuff. The other thing that happened, which in a sense was my mistake, but also the people who, I only got this training opportunity last Thursday. So I've been dancing as fast as I can, and since then to put this together. I know it all, but putting it into a package that I thought would be appropriate. And they didn't tell me that they had developed most of the course already. It was quite compatible with what I was telling them. And so there was no conflict, but this was a 2-hour session. I talked for an hour, we took a 5-minute break, came back, and the teachers, the 3 teachers in the session said, let us tell you about what we're doing and you comment on that, which is probably something that I should have checked out ahead of time, saying, you're not starting from scratch. What have you done? So that was an error on my part. I think it was an error on the part of the people who hired me to do it, that we should have had some more discussion about where they were, what they were doing already. This was not basic, new fallen snow. These are not completely new people. They've been thinking about this for a while. I had sent them a lot of materials maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they had shared those with the teachers, and the teachers had read some of it and it puts things in. So right now, I don't know, 2 hours in, certainly it's not a successful initiative yet, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. And I hope we have more coaching sessions as time goes on. I think my approach to skill building, which is different than content, and that is a little bit of instruction, absolutely necessary, but emphasis on a little bit, and then practice with feedback, So that's where I hope the model. A lot of times you do training and then the end of it, then people go away and you don't see them again, and you don't know what they're doing. So after 3 days of PowerPoints, they're all of a sudden supposed to go out and practice this stuff without much practice even in the class. And is that not so true? Sabrina and I talked about this in Maryland in April. We want students to have skills. We want students to be critical thinkers. We want students to be leaders, but we rarely give them the chance in the school day to practice those things, or even to get a lesson or an instruction on those things. My wife and I did a teacher training in Texas. We had 100 teachers in the session. Too many. Okay, too many teachers. I said, how many want their students to be critical thinkers? I didn't go into the definition, just a skill. Here's a skill. All the hands went up. How many actually have a lesson on critical thinking? 3. And so it's a dream, it's a hope, it's not a real concrete goal, and they don't work towards it. So skill building for teaching the future, which is a skill, should be a little bit of practice. Here's the concepts, here's scenarios, here's trends, here's inbound change, outbound change, those kind of plans, goals, all some technical language. and then start doing it, just like Julie is doing with the playbook. Of course, Julie, she had the benefit of a master's degree. That certainly helped. I hope it doesn't require a master's degree to be able to teach it. So it's a little early. Thanks for the question, Sabrina. A little early to say how this is going to go. I can tell you, these folks, I would not say on fire, but they have been very competent and quick. I mean, I just had my first meeting with them 4 weeks ago, and here I am, doing training sessions. So I'll keep you in touch how it goes.
Absolutely.
And we've already talked about it. Turns out that the superintendent of this district is also the president of the American Association of Superintendents.
Yeah.
You're kidding. So this lady's got real stroke in the field. So I think if this goes well, we may actually roll this out into their association. And Sabrina's work is with superintendents. So I really look forward to working.
Wow. So yeah, it's wonderful to hear. So I put a statement here saying that the teachers, at least in Taiwan and in Asia, they feel
Yes.
they don't have much authority to add or change
No,
anything
no.
in the curriculum.
Yes.
So, and they have so much to do. Teachers will just focus on getting students ready for the national exam.
Yep.
That's the main focus. So I
Yep.
feel like rather than like wanting to insert futures literacy or future studies as a core part of the core curriculum, I think if we could train teachers or change their mindset to, as Draper Kaufman say, futurizing the classroom, not necessarily having a particular syllabus or subject, but futurizing the mindset. And so if teachers were to be more, have this futures literacy in the back of the head as they teach, like you say, the PBL, they incorporate futures thinking in it. So in everything that they do, if they could incorporate part of futures thinking into what they do, like, actively incorporating work that, encourage students to critically think about the present, the past, and the future, that might get us somewhere if the curriculum is so strict.
Let me give you a learning that I have picked up pretty much consistently, even though the number of cases is small, and that anytime there is an institutional commitment to do futures thinking, it comes from the administration. As a 1960s sociologist, I wanted change to erupt from the masses. Frankly, I was a little naive at that time, but the Houston program was created by the dean. This is created by the superintendent. Every single one, the Kalegi program was created by the owners of this private school, the same way in Toronto. So that's the institutional. Now, teachers, if they can find any space, will stick it. And that's why we have so many more college teachers doing foresight than high school teachers, because they are not so constrained. And there are a lot of people on their own basically teaching futures in college. But to do it in K-12, you're right. But the administration has to authorize it so that those very tight bureaucracies, very focused on high stakes testing, state standards and all that, they have to be given the discretion and the authority to actually put this in the curriculum. So it's a hard sell. Great. Other questions, comments? Great, appreciate it.
Dr. Bishop,
Please.
pleasure to meet you, sir.
Absolutely, me too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the talk. I particularly appreciate the approach there about how to integrate it into curriculums, because my father had been, I'm from Pennsylvania originally. My father had been on our local school board for years. So, hearing the ins and outs of, dealing with superintendents, teachers unions, all of these kinds of things, a fixed curriculum, a fixed school year of, 180-ish days. And, whenever teachers unions, superintendents hear adding something to curriculum, they automatically assume that means pushing something else out, right?
They automatically assume they're not going to take anything else out. They're just going to add it on to an already oversubscribed curriculum, either one or the other. Neither one is very happy.
Yeah. So the idea of integrating it into your approach to integrating it is really fantastic, and I think it if more districts and more superintendents and more of these folks who have the ability and the power to implement them can hear that, and if you can do the convincing, they can turn around and do the convincing to their constituent teachers and people. That
the other reason that I didn't go into is that I took it was something called, it was an NSF kind of a teacher development program in the 1970s. It was on the history of science, taught by a wonderful professor from the University of Oklahoma. And he said, do not confuse universities with the source of innovation and change. That was just a straight out ball statement. He said the last time the university innovated anything in society is when the University of Bologna introduced Aristotle to the Middle Ages. And ever since then, because, and it goes right back to their mission. Their mission, unfortunately, not unfortunately, it's a good mission, is to transmit the lessons, the knowledge, the experience, and the awareness of the past to the new generation so that they be successful in the future. And knowledge of the past, as I talked about, I always start with the past. I always talk about where we've come from into where we're going. And that is important, but it's not complete. Do you assume that if you knew everything about the past that you would be successful in the future? Well, you'd be more successful than if you knew nothing about the past, but maybe 60%. Because now we know the future is full of novelty, full of surprise, full of the ability to be resilient in uncertain and surprising futures. And if we're not teaching them that, in addition to all the stuff that's happened to get us here, then we're not doing them a very good service. But the problem of the education mindset, and frankly, in a scientifically based, evidence-based culture, where is the evidence? The evidence is all in the past. And so we only talk about the past. We don't talk about it. And it's just baked into our culture, unfortunately. That's across, generally across the world. And that's one of the biggest reasons. It's what this guy called it, a conserving institution. It's an institution whose purpose, it's like religion, in many ways like government. It is to preserve stability, to preserve the status quo. Whereas the innovative institutions, you can name them in business, in sport, in entertainment, in military, they're in competitive businesses. They can't sit around and say, oh, well, we all did it this way in the past, so therefore we can get by. What I saw in the eyes of the 20 educators that I talked to, good people, dedicated people, I saw it in their eyes. If I pull the trigger on this and somebody gets jacked out of shape because we're doing something different, then I'm going to be in trouble. And my heart went out to them. They couldn't take the risk. They weren't a superintendent, but even a superintendent has got a board, has got the community, has got the mayor and all this stuff. Why are you doing that crazy thing? Well, you don't need to do that. Even if it's good, somebody criticizes it, and then all of a sudden, and one black mark against you is strike one, and there's only 2 strikes. 2 strikes, and you're labeled a troublemaker. And after that, so the risk aversion of a conserving institution is so huge that getting over that barrier is really. And my wife was right. She said, my experience with education is you'll have a very hard time being successful. Well, I've guaranteed that it is a hard time. We've got a few little, pieces of light happening, and I hope there'll be more. I hope we can build on those, but it's a long slog. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate it.
But Ian, the other observation though is that even the institutions, in terms of their mission to conserve, are now in several places. And you mentioned this back in the beginning of your presentation when you talked about what's going on in Texas. Those things that we held true, that we thought were the way things were supposed to be. Florida is now folding on itself. And so we're at a point now where there's some used futures, and, where these institutions are no longer even serving the purpose for which they were designed. No. And so if you don't have a conversation about about new design when something is folding all over on itself, then all you have is collapse. And so I think that there's an existential imperative, and, you know, not to mention a moral imperative for pushing this agenda, you know, the agenda forward in terms of raising the mindset and raising the awareness about, you know, what the future, about futures. And the other thing, I would be remiss, particularly in the context of, you know, here in the United States and really, quite frankly, all over the world, is that, you know, futures are emancipated. They're untouched. And so it's where people's agencies live. And that's another, you know, imperative for us to, you know, fight the good fight, if you will.
Yeah, well, you bring up an interesting point, Sabrina, that education is sensitive to community pressure. That pressure you're talking about is from the political sphere. It's unfortunate and it is existential. It's awful. And yet they do innovate, but they are only innovate when the world really puts a demand on them. Since I went to a high school, one of the best high schools in the US, you know, back in the dark ages, that didn't even have a biology class. And now biology is part of the regular curriculum. Computer technology, computer science, part of the regular curriculum. Biotechnology, you name it, you name it. But in each case, the world said, you need to teach this. It told the public schools, it told the colleges. So it's what I call a demand signal. They will respond to a demand signal because at the end of the day, they're also a business. They also get money either from taxes or from tuition. And so they have to serve the needs of their community. The problem is that here I am telling them that they should do something for which there is almost no demand signal. I mean, we have 500 foresight professionals in the APF, probably 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 in the world, compared to, you name it, any other occupation, accounting, engineering, law enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. Those are demand signals that they believe they can live on, they can survive on, and indeed make money on. And we're not large enough yet. This is not as cultural prescription yet that we should be thinking in alternatives and empowering young people to be leaders. That's not yet culturally. In fact, if anything, it's probably, given the Texas experience, a little bit off-putting for those people who want to preserve the status quo. And I mean, I had an enlightened moment once. I was doing training in a, shall I say, a quite authoritarian country. I won't name any names. And I'm teaching about critical thinking and alternatives and scenarios and things like that. And I didn't say it, but in the back of my mind, I said, do they really want me to be teaching critical thinking to their young people in a country where their critical thinking is not something that is very, very valuable? It didn't go anywhere. Nothing happened. They didn't put me in jail. Thank you very much. But there was a real culture clash. So you're right. The education is being pressured, unfortunately, for political purposes and not at all looking for the interests of young people or the interests of the community. And those are the times we live in. As I said, the inbound change, we are dealt a hand, and we just picked up a poker hand that has no pairs. Sorry, and all four suits. Sorry, you got to play the hand anyway. And so, and I think we can, I hope, give young people a chance. Okay, you got a poor hand. I mean, you know, let's admit it. It's challenging, but you got to play it, and you will play it. And there are things that can be done despite. And let's go forward. I'm always I think of a man, a psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl, long time ago, psychiatrist who was in concentration camps in World War II, Jewish concentration camps. And his vision in that camp, and he survived, thankfully, was to be in an auditorium, warm, safe, well-fed, addressing a number of people in a professional talk. He came from a Nazi concentration camp to that vision. So you think of a person in that kind of awful environment where he's a total victim of his circumstances, and yet had a vision and did whatever he could to get out of that, fortunately rescued, et cetera, et cetera. That's really an inspiring story to me. And so there is no, I don't know, there are challenging circumstances for everybody, but giving people even a little bit of hope that they can do something about it, I believe, begins to dispel that fear, that what I'll call unresolved dread and unresolved anxiety about how awful all this stuff is. And let's look at it. Let's study it. Let's see where it could go, because there are upsides and downsides. to all of this stuff.
Yeah. So we are 33 past the
That's
hour.
it. I know it is. I know it is. I could go on all day. I'm sorry.
I
You
know.
all.
I mean, we can be here forever. So if there's any more like really urgent remarks or comments anybody wants to make before we close off. I mean, Peter has been most generous with his time. Thank you so
It's
much,
been
Peter.
wonderful.
And you're so inspirational. Like, I know I'm fighting a hard fight here. Like, my cards are really bad cards that I have, but we still
Yeah.
have to play it, right? Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. You're so inspirational.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time with me, and tell your friends, talk to the teachers, talk to young people, and ask them the very simple question. I mean, my vision is somewhere in the 2080s, somebody's going to come to my children or my grandchildren or whatever and said, well, when your grandfather was an educator, they weren't teaching the students about the future. Why didn't they tell them about the future? Which is a nice, simple question. So that's the question I want to ask educators today. Why are we not talking to them about their future? Oh, we're preparing them for their future by teaching them calculus and biotechnology and things like that. But what about change? What about how to be in the future? How to deal with change and deal with novelty and things? Well, most people don't believe that's a teachable thing. And frankly, every skill level, I guess back to writing, but the professional skills of accounting and management and business policy was all done informally 150 years ago. I mean, the business person would sit down with that ledger book and write down how much money came in today, how much money we spent, total it up, and go home for dinner. That was accounting. So we're now in that phase of forecasting, of dealing with the future. It is not considered to be a professional skill for everyone, futures for all, futures literacy. And it's not considered to be teachable to young people to be able to do that. I mean, schools even struggle to put financial literacy into there, even though they have enormous resources. You know who supports financial literacy? All the banks and all of the financial institutions. Talk about trillions of dollars of capital put to try and teach this literacy. And what do we have? Puny little futures organizations, to try and teach futures literacy. So I go on and on. This is wonderful,
Wow.
folks. I have a whole new friends. Good luck to you. Congratulations, Sissy and Lavone, for the great community of practice you put together. I look forward to being part of more of these sessions. Okay.
Thank you so much,